Hey everybody, welcome to the Run4Ben Podcast. My name is Jamen Spitzer. With me today, as always, is the director, Mike Piccirillo. How you doing today, Mike?
Doing good. How are you?
Fantastic. And today we are doing podcast number 4 about documentary episode 4. So the way we do it is we do a documentary episode on Run4Ben, which is about my dad, Ben Spitzer, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2014, and the marathons I ran for him and with him. We've done 3 documentary episodes at this point. So if you haven't checked those out, you might want to pop onto YouTube, head over to Run4Ben and watch those episodes to catch up. Each of those episodes has a podcast where we go a little bit deeper into those documentary episodes. With that being said, let's get into episode 4, Mike.
Episode 4 is titled Moving for a number of reasons. Not only are we at the very beginning of the episode, we kind of catch up with Ben and see him as he is continuing to keep moving, which is a common mantra for folks with Parkinson's. It helps them with movement, and he's using an automatic ping pong machine, a serving machine. And then that's his way of keeping moving, doing something fun. And then moving in the sense of you and Britta are moving because you have a new job and you have to relocate, and you're packing things up in North Hollywood and you're relocating to San Pedro.
Yeah, I mean, the opening for me, I'm really aware of this scene with the automatic. My dad bought this automatic machine where you load in a bunch of ping pong balls. And the reason he did this is because, you can play even if somebody else can't come around. So this thing would turn and then shoot ping pong balls at random, so it would allow you to, return or work on your game. It's good for hand-eye coordination. There's big movements with it as well, which are very helpful. So because he already loved ping pong, he and his friend Ken would play all the time. Even growing up, like he had the good paddle and the squeegee brushes for it and everything. And we had a table tennis table downstairs. So anyway, to get back to this scene is by the way, and also he was really good. He was he had a spin that would be phenomenal. And as much as we played, I never beat my dad. I think my brother Kyle got better because he was in a club when he was in Austin, Texas, but I never beat my dad, when he had all of his capacity. So that record stands. But in this case, so that's kind of the behind of how good he was. So then when I saw this recording, which he recorded himself doing this because he was trying to show movement and positivity, and he was also trying to see how he was doing, and he was going to maybe share these on ping pong or share these on YouTube or something like that. And so watching this was really hard to watch. It's probably to date still one of the hardest things, even with the different things we'll see coming up about him being in the hospital and whatnot, because it was something he was so good at, something that he really wanted to continue and tried to continue. And yeah, the video is it's just a tough one to watch because he's having so much difficulty being able to return, and then he stops the machine. You can see he stops it and then has to hold himself up. And I thought the interesting thing about starting the episode with this and then moving us into us moving is it really shows that as much as I was in touch with my dad and talking with him, I wasn't there for the day to day in 2020. And this is a big reason for, moving like we did and getting in touch and doing the documentary and doing the run was I didn't know all of how, the day to day of these things being downstairs trying and fighting, and I was just unaware that kind of was going on.
Has Ben ever spoken with you about the specific frustration of being so good at ping pong, table tennis, or and really frustrated by his challenges to do so with Parkinson's, and then kind of writ large, did he ever discuss with you in any detail like his intent of what he was going to do with these vignette pieces of footage? And there's more to come from that he records that he's intending to post in some form or fashion on the web. Did he ever discuss any of that with you?
To the first of specifically ping pong, no, not specific to that. I mean, he probably mentioned it, but the thing he most talked about in that respect was when he would go somewhere, like Rocksteady Boxing or something like that. He would talk to different people who maybe had Parkinson's longer than he had, or were diagnosed earlier, but maybe were the same age. And he was, doing worse than they were as far as, movement, and the effects of Parkinson's were weighing on him more. He had progressed further. So he would talk about that frustration. So part of like knowing that he was frustrated about this, that he was losing abilities, that in comparison, it seemed others who had it as long weren't. And he was confused and frustrated as to why that was happening, which again, we go back to Parkinson's affects everybody so differently. But that was a small consolation for him because it was affecting him, much more quickly. And so, specifics like walking, running, riding a bike, he was able to do for short windows, and they were taken away pretty quick. So once he would get going, like with this ping pong or something like that, he was hoping that it would then improve and make things better. And it would certainly, I'm sure, had he done nothing, it would have progressed even faster. But that's what he talked about, was he was doing these things and going to the same thing, seeing these people in classes, and they maybe weren't progressing, but he was. And that was a source of frustration. And the reason he was doing these vignettes and these videos, like we see, like you said, we'll see other ones where he's riding a stationary bike, walking or running or doing the steps, just in place in the room and whatnot. He was recording those to try to share his story of what it was like trying to stay positive, the effects that Parkinson's were having. I think he wanted to know, because he was such a public person with the magic and juggling, and he wasn't able to do that. He still wanted to connect. And I think that goes to the power of, connection. Is he was a person who connected with people, and that was becoming more difficult. So this was a way to continue to try to connect with people and show some positivity, because he was so big about like, being positive and trying to see the good side of things. And he read a lot of Pope John Paul, who had Parkinson's, and how Pope John Paul wrote about that. And he would take a lot of that inspiration and how to view life, and and the gratitude of the day to day, and wanted to share that, just like he had been reading, pass that along. So that's why the videos were there. Sadly, he wasn't able to do a lot with those either, because he had such difficulty with the motor skills of being able to edit videos and um, you know work the computer. He was used to be really good with that too. He did all of his own stuff, and then he was unable to do that. So the whole thing was, yeah, it was difficult to see those things that he really liked, like that, kind of not kind of, they were being taken away by Parkinson's.
Sure. And, we get into that. Actually, this does come up again during the course of the episode, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Just you also are frequently telling us throughout this whole series how you're processing these things, and kind of occasionally even putting yourself in your dad's shoes to some extent. And I know that we in a prior documentary episode you've discussed the concern that you would have of the genetics of it and being around your dad's age at a certain point and all that. So
Yeah.
But at the time also, because your life is so crazy right now, because in 2020 October 2nd you are in the peak of COVID, having to relocate, and your job has, it's so far away, you just want to have a better commute and be situated with them so you can, perform better for them. And we kind of show that process happening. And, we have a little bit of things do get a little more lighthearted after we open the episode, and you're packing everything up, and your wife Britta is very patient with you and allowing you to do all of these recordings, and it's fun to watch her. And you know what, I will say, in your defense, she also does tend to allow herself to get a little silly, so it's nice to see. And what do you take me back to that period of time where because you're also, and this isn't discussed so much in that episode, but you're also kind of soft planning what will eventually be what we do for the Detroit Free Press Marathon, but also interviewing your dad remotely to help you with the documentary. So you're kind of, juggling moving, your job, COVID, Run4Ben logistics. And do you tell me about that experience?
Yeah, that move, I had interviewed for different positions because I was doing real estate, and it just kind of really started, and was doing calling and really trying to break in, and then pandemic hit, so things shut down. So I was right to looking for a job, get that job as discussed. That's in Torrance, and it was fine the commute for a while, especially because during pandemic traffic in LA was not that bad, which was one of those pandemic perks, I guess, that happened in LA. There's not everybody was out driving, so it was a little bit easier, but still we'd also were kind of we were coming up on our lease on that one place, and we're looking at other places. So Britta had found that place in San Pedro, which, by the way, was, like, as I mentioned, is like 148 feet from the ocean, which was to date the best running experience and in front porch journaling and gratitude list making experience of all time. It was just absolutely beautiful to be that close to the ocean. And it was closer to work, and Britta was remote, so it didn't matter, if she was here, there, or wherever. So, yeah, we were packing up, and that was the thing about doing the filmmaking plus, running plus this other thing. At this point, we were starting to get a little bit better, and maybe knew that we were going to be doing a little bit more than like the 7 to 8 minutes. So I started to film some more, start utilizing this camera that I have here a little bit more to get some better shots and whatnot. And this moving was, there's a lot to do, and I knew bringing out the camera was going to be annoying. But the other side of that is, I don't get what is a big life moment for a lot of people. Is moving during the pandemic was, people did it, but it was not the easiest to do. And then on top of that, I'm a Michigan boy, so the one thing about Michigan is, like, you do it yourself type of folks. You mow your own yard and move yourself, and for better or worse, that's the case. but in Los Angeles, and we were going, it can be cheaper for those type of jobs to get movers and things, and just to move all of this stuff. Also, we weren't going to be able to get help from a bunch of other people. Also, side note, I think at a certain age, in your 20s, you get pizza and beer and you move your friends because you all have like apartments and stuff. That's fine. I think like over the age of like 30 or something like that, it's time to stop that and just pay for movers. Nobody wants pizza and beer to do that for the weekend. So there's a PSA for anybody. Just it's much easier. The stress level, like once we had done this, by the way, got movers, I was like, what have I been doing this? Trying to like, I'd moved so many friends at that point and had other people help me. So anyway, PSA, just hire movers. It's easier. By the time you rent a truck and return it and pay for gas, it's the same price anyway. So anyway, but it was the first time that was happening, and that's where I kind of sit in the car, because it was weird to have other men show up to the house and just do everything. And I'm like, I don't know, cleaning little things, or in one case, disconnecting the refrigerator, which I didn't unhook the line for the water, or didn't shut off the water line. So when I unplugged it, it was just spraying everywhere, which we could catch the aftermath of that. But it was just spraying everywhere until finally got a bucket and then turned the water off. And we catch the end of that. So it was funny. It was fun to do that. But I also knew like I get caught by Britta in the back room, because I'm like, I want to film this, but I got to be careful, what I'm doing. Sometimes it was playful. Other times, which, you cut around, was like, dude, what are you doing? We're trying to move the house. Put the camera down. We're fucking moving, which, that's to be expected. I get it. That's part of the process of doing that. It is hard to turn on camera when you're like, I kind of need to get this, but also I understand how this is going to be annoying.
For sure. And I think also the other thing I think it's worth mentioning is the movers kind of have to do stuff themselves because of COVID. Yeah. You can't really be around them. So that's part of it for sure, right?
Well, the other thing is they're good at this. They do this all the time. They don't need me trying to be like, hey, maybe, get out. We already have a system. We do this all the time. The best thing you can do is get out of our way. Unless we need help that we'll ask for, like once in a while, they'll be like, can you move this? Can you do this? Unhook that or whatever. But by and large, they were like, came in ready to do their job. So it's all my thing that I'm working out, that I got to be like, ooh, let me grab something, and like, it's like one of those things when you know how to do something and somebody wants to be helpful, and that is really nice that somebody wants to be helpful. But oftentimes, and we all know this, somebody comes on to help, and it's as much work trying to teach them and help them help you than it is if they're just like, what the best help would be? Get out of here.
Step aside.
Do you want to really help me, or do you want to feel good that you got to help? If you really want to help me, please leave. But sometimes it's hard for people to say that. Certainly I'm not great at it, but I knew that the best thing that I could do was get out of the way. And that's what made me think and I want to be very clear. And I think I clear it up in the video too, but it's like, in no way am I making a comparison, but it made me think in this small way, if I'm feeling like in the way, or like people have to do something for me that I paid them and they're supposed to do. But if I feel a little bit uncomfortable with this, I knew that my dad was dealing with this in a fully way different way that was far more difficult and involved a lot more than hiring some movers. So I understand the difference, but I do drop in and understanding like, Oh my gosh. If this is a constant thing of needing help with all of these different things, it is a difficult thing sometimes to not be able to do what you feel you should be able to do, or have other people do for you things that um you feel that you should be able to do. And it just made me think of my dad as I was going through that, of like, help me to have some like patience and understanding for like, I wonder if I feel like that, how much more difficult that is, and what can I do to, you know, help in that way, the help might just be having a better understanding and more patience and more empathy, and for that, and understanding that. Yeah, and that got more and more through the years as things happened. I understood that more and more, because it was, got all the way to, full care for him, in every aspect. Yeah.
And I don't, and you do clear it up for sure in the episode, but what a serendipitous opportunity the movers provide for you, because you have that moment where you can, you're working on this documentary, so it kind of prompted you to do so, but you get to kind of reflect and think about your dad, and that's the thing with this episode, is we're constantly kind of peaks and valleys of what's going on with you and what's going on with your dad. And it's something I know we talked about in the making of this episode, is um, you know you're still living your life as everyone would expect you to be, and it's not always, you're still having to move, and your focus is on that and your job and COVID and all these things. But yes, your dad is still has Parkinson's the whole time, and it's still an issue, and it's still something, it's always in the back of your mind. And you're processing that, and it gives you this moment where you can kind of sit and go, okay, kind of abstractly speaking, I'm more restrained in this moment than I'm used to, and I can only imagine how it's exponentially more for my dad. And on top of that, the frustration, because at this point too, your dad's verbal skills are definitely deteriorating, and it's harder for him to communicate. And that was kind of his, that was his thing. That was his moneymaker, was that, and that's like, regressing. And as it's with the table tennis too, it's like all of these things that he was so confident and strong and good at, it's like Parkinson's is slowly pulling those things away. So there's this whole kind of, thing happening to him, and he's trying to do his best to keep grace with that.
The thing that popped up to me there was how hard my dad was working. And no matter how much he continued to work, and again, I'm not saying this across the board for everybody. I'm saying that this was the case for specifically my dad, is what I'm relating to here. But the he put in this effort, and no matter what, and this is general too, is like, you may get better for he may get better for a little while, but ultimately, no matter how hard he worked on that, Parkinson's was going to take more. Parkinson's was going to win. It doesn't have a cure, so it was going to continue. So there was no, if I do this, I will ultimately get better and break free of this. It was, I will work my ass off to maintain, knowing that it will still slowly take away no matter how hard I worked. And I was like, God damn, dude. That's, like, I don't know how to get my head around that. It's like trying to, you can, you can't. That's why, I'll state it as much as I, possibly can here, is I don't have Parkinson's, but, um, there's no way I could ever fully relate to that. But I remember these things coming up, these situations where I went, man, ugh, yeah, no, I mean, nothing to say. It did. I was really, I remember being very, very bummed out after like coming to that realization and recording that and just and that's where like the helplessness of a son is like, I want to change this for him as much as he wants to change it far more, but that, now I want to go in and do something and I can't, again, the helplessness. So what I could do was I thought I can turn on the camera and just show that this experience is normal, that I'm going through this, and maybe somebody else who's a caregiver, or a son or a daughter or a friend or a husband or a wife will be able to relate. And we won't be able to fix anything with that, but in that relation, again, going back to that connection piece, we can connect. And I think there is, um, you know, um, I don't know, but we need connection, you know. So anyway, I just said, did you hear me say anyway?
Anyway, no, you're absolutely right, but you also hit on what we are doing in this pod documentary series is also that impact, because Parkinson's, there is kind of the core person who has it, but it's the people around said person also, and it has a profound impact in many ways on people. And something we always hope that when we're doing this stuff is that people who are also experiencing it second, third hand can kind of see what you're dealing with and how we've documented it, and how maybe, whereas, as we've always said, we're not physicians, we don't offer any sure answers for anything. It's just your unique experience and just kind of how you are dealing with it, and help them kind of process what they're dealing with, and like I said, just kind of give you some, just kind of understanding of what other people are going through. And I think that helps. And I think, your dad was trying to do that too with his videos. And that's what his intent was to go, look, this is what's happening to me. You know me from before. Things are different now. Let's show everybody what's going on. And also, not to be long-winded about it, but also, as we made this and we discussed with your dad what we were going to do, he realized, I think this was kind of the, okay, well, I can't really do it anymore, but I know Jamen can kind of take the torch and run with it and do that for me. And that was kind of the thing that kept this thing afloat, was just this constant kind of journaling of this experience with the intent to provide it to people, to just kind of offer some perspective.
Yep. I've found to be very, helpful. It can sometimes not seem like a lot, but connection is a huge thing. It's what I found it through, getting sober, how important it was. And then, reading Brene Brown right at the time that I did, and starting this documentary, it was, all that connection. And I do want to flip now, like, because, well, ultimately, this is not a light subject, so it can get heavy. But what I do like about this episode a lot is there is a mix of these two things, but there is also an incredible lightness, and humor this episode has. I love that we see Britta, just she's the best, and there's a lot of humor through all of these things. Like, it's a relationship. Day to day, you have this guy trying to film, and the frustrations and annoyance, and like, but then as we unhook the water and it goes all over. She said the my own chip gains line, and she's very funny herself. So it was a fun day ultimately to do all these, to have that day. And I just said that anyway. The reason that we laughed about that is there's this one clip where I'm in the car, and I end with, anyway, Britta and I have talked about that often, about why we'll be like in a serious conversation, and then end it with anyway. And I think that is such a, I don't know, I guess it's everybody. I think it's a Michigan Midwest type of thing too. It's like, well, don't take it all too seriously. It's like letting the air out of something. It's like, I said something serious, but don't land it too hard. And but it should land that hard. It's one of those things of it's like a dismissive comment to myself, and I was catching it in real time. Like, stop dismissing this important thing. It's okay to be honest and emotional and heartfelt, and then just leave it there. You don't have to try to wrap it up or let the air out so that people feel okay or something like that. It's just but I say anyway, I've been saying anyway, and then literally a second later accidentally drop it in real time again right after saying that, which was hilarious. I thought that was really funny.
Yes. And it's very human, and it's also kind of fun to watch you do this a couple times that I've experienced, where you kind of edit yourself on camera where you're like, oh, why did I just do that? So stupid, whatever. And it's fun to watch for sure. And we'll show it when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But from there, if I may jump ahead a little, we get the whole house gutted, we get painted, ready to go, and you're ready to move out. And you'd live there. So just kind of quickly, let's talk about, this is a big move for you guys as you relocate. It's your big first kind of California family move. It's like you're moving into a new place and starting all this new life stuff during extraordinary times.
Yeah, we were married at that point, and starting off in that place, I was actually with other roommates in that house, that the Sun Valley, North Hollywood house, and got married, and she moved in at that time. Yeah, so this was our first like place together that we were moving to. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just kind of buttoned it all up, and you had some memories there. And I know your parents had visited you. You mentioned that as well, and you're kind of starting anew in San Pedro. So we move you over to San Pedro, and the next day, kind of interesting. And I'll let you you could walk us through that whole experience, because we catch just the tail end of it, of what happens. Tell me what happens.
We moved to San Pedro and move in, get everything moved in. The movers come in, get everything in, and it's probably 11:30 or 12 at night or something by the time we wind down, and I go to bed because I have work the next morning. So I get up that morning, I literally finding my belt in boxes, grabbing my shirts from a random room and heading out. And Britta's gonna, do some organization around the house that day, and then I'm gonna come back and we'll get it set up. I go into work, and somebody said, hey, the manager, general manager wants to see you with I think the HR person as well at this car dealership. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't great. And it hadn't been going well there. Again, won't explain it, but it wasn't going well. I was amazing, but they anyway, it's hard to not want to like explain the whole thing, but it doesn't matter. The So I get called in that day. I'm like sitting at this desk waiting to just go in and talk with them, and ultimately said, I wasn't doing what they had hired me for. I disagreed with that. Um, and then they let me go. Um, and so I go back, pack my stuff up. I didn't really even get to know everybody there that well because it was a few months. Literally the day I move, the next morning, and they let me go. And I went, oh, we got that documentary going. This is a big life event. I have to pull my phone out and record. So where we catch up on this is me walking down, a main street in Torrance away from my job, which I had just got fired from the day I moved to the place to be closer to there. So I was going to have to drive back. So I drove back home, parked my car at the beautiful new place right by the ocean. So happy. Also, rent was higher at that place too. We upped in rent because we're both working and I have a better job. Let's get a little bit nicer house. And so anyway, that was one of the things as well. I pulled up and Britta was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Fully not thinking like, "Oh, my husband's home because he just got shit canned." The first day we moved to San Pedro, and I said, "I got let go." She thought it was a joke. And I was like, "No, I got fired today." She was gracious about it because that just sucked overall. I explained why. It was very confusing to me. You know, I have not lost very many jobs or been let go. And if I did, I knew why. One of them was like, I was way too into comedy at one point. I was like, yeah, I get it. On the first job I ever got let go because I just kept doing too much comedy and staying out and prioritizing comedy over anything else. I was like, that's fine. I get it. This one, I was like, dude, this makes no sense. So I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, whatever, but yeah, now we're in a new place, higher rent. And, I don't have a job and I'm still filming and getting ready for a marathon. So it's like, oh, cool. Now I get to add looking for another job on top of this, which I had just been doing. I felt a lot of pressure because of like, gee, I was just doing the real estate thing and had to find this job and now I got to find another job. So that's what happened with Britta's job was able to hold on. And I was sober at the time. So I reached out to some of the people who were, people that cared for me and had been sober longer and let them know what was going on. And like, just keep doing this. Never seen, if you stick with things and just one foot in front of the other, do the next right thing. I haven't seen anybody dropped on their head that just keeps moving forward. So that's what I did. I listened to them and just said, okay, we just got to do the next thing. Don't take on everything else. Don't take on all this shame or guilt or whatever else. This is what you're going to do. You run it this time. Good thing you have running. You have something going. And then just during the day, try to find something else. Now, I will say that it turned out to be that next job was one that I was able to do remotely, which was absolutely what I would need for the next chapter of, you know, um, supporting my dad and my mom. And so it worked out. It worked out for the best to make my decision very easy for their next documentaries, or the next episodes we'll see. But that it turned out to be a good thing.
It's interesting to see all of that kind of playing as a viewer of this content for me, and watching all the footage and seeing it evolve. And it's really interesting to see that. So we kind of wrap things up with you at this place where you've accepted your fate, and now we are approximately 16 days away from the 2020 Detroit Free Press Marathon. So you're also not like dropping the ball on any of that stuff. That's still coming. So you're mindful of all of that. So kind of give me your kind of, if you can remember those final thoughts, kind of maybe the day after or hours after that bombshell. Where were you with that experience?
So, well, one thing I want to touch back on is like the reason I was able at that point to get through that and not to spiral or go too crazy is I was just over a year sober at that time. So that would have been me like a year and 4 months or something like that sober. That really is the reason I was able to get through that and just understand that it was going to be okay, that I had people that were, looking out for me, and that I don't see the whole picture. So that was very fresh in my mind. The biggest concern for me at the time was like, um this is going to be, I felt a little pressure of like, I don't have a job and I'm going to start pulling out a camera and doing this documentary. So the fear was like, not to just be, don't look for a job and just hang out and do documentary stuff for like 2 weeks without anything, and like, worried about the judgment that, Britta might have for me during the day. So I was thinking of a lot about that kind of stuff too, going into that. And certainly didn't want the added pressure of having to look for a job while also doing, the end of the marathon. And there were things that we were getting ready that also we were like, inviting and getting ready for like our finish line here for the documentary, which is going to be in a couple weeks. So we were sending out invitations for, a backyard social distanced hangout and like finish line outside, because at that time during the pandemic, you could be outside. So you could have people over, but they could be, outside and social distance. So we were setting that up as well, having people over. So there was work to be done with that, of setting people up. So there was just that added another thing that we needed to do at the end, along with some like, kind of like guilt and shame around like not having the job and whatnot. Um, but yeah, as far as like pulling out the camera too is, I was aware that, oh, this is a big moment, as bad as this feels, or like, as much as I don't want to bring the camera, this was the first time that it was really happening. I remember calling you and going, Mike, I rem I just lost my job, dude. Like, I didn't lose it, I was fired. I say lose my job. I think that's a softer way of saying I got shit canned. They didn't want me anymore. I was unwanted at that place of business, and, uh, so I told you that. I'm like, I recorded right when I walked out, just to let you know, and I'm gonna record some more, which, we'll talk about, I think, coming up, is like, just what that was like. But I knew, I'm like, the other side of my brain was like, this is really good stuff. We gotta record it. So that was kind of the thought process there, was like, you gotta use it. You can't, it would be, we'll get through this and then I'll be really bummed that I didn't, do this. That was the still continued. It helped me later. Is the hardest thing about being the subject and also being the person who's running the camera is, I have to be aware, and you and I talked about this a lot. I have to be aware of each difficult situation or triumph or tragedy or sadness as a thing that is going to be the spot of connection. Nobody wants to see a bland story that just moves like this. That's, talk about Brene Brown again. People want to see, your kitchen table self, but that's the self we don't want to show everybody, especially with like, iPhones and, Instagram. We're seeing the highlights of everybody. And then on the other side of that, you also don't want to just, trauma dump everything and be like, look how terrible everything is, and go overboard. So there's this line, that being in it and also trying to figure out like, when is the time. And this happened certainly later with my dad's, as he was, progressing with his Parkinson's, is where were the times to film it because it's the reality, check with people to make sure that it's okay. Sometimes you couldn't check with everybody that it was okay. I had to just turn it on and then know that if we don't want to use it, we don't want to use it. But I did hear from other people. I don't know if I've even mentioned this to you before, but I heard through the grapevine that there were people, I won't say exactly who or get too specific about it, but we're like, why is he filming this? Like, what is he doing? I don't think this is right. So I knew that was the case anyway. And these were people who were close, that were asking these questions. And I said, I understand. Like, I totally understand that. I feel that oftentimes, but I do think that this is important. And if you just consistently show just this bland or just wins all the time, nobody who I'm really concerned about with this is going to feel any kind of connection or it's not going to help them at all, because the thing that we didn't see was what I was trying to capture, was that real life happens. It's difficult, but we'll be okay together. But to show that, you have to show all aspects of that. The funny, the highs, crossing the finish lines of the marathons, but also the day after that, how dark it can be after that, how sad it can be, which we get into in the future. It gets sadder, it gets more dark, but also the highs go up as well because of that, and that's how life can be. And that's okay. We're all living that. So if we try to just whitewash it all and just, make it all something that looks good to everybody, then it looks good to nobody, because everybody understands this is not how we live our day-to-day lives. So that was the understanding of, like, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to spend this much time, if I'm going to frustrate and annoy my wife while we're packing and everything, then I'm going to at least make it worth our while and not come with like, hey, remember how I had these difficult situations where I turned on the camera and all we got is this bland piece of garbage that nobody even connects with? What's the point of that? What a waste of time. And the other side of that is the same people that had a lot of creatives and filmmakers that were also in my sober circle that encouraged me and had been through these things and said, here's what you'll do. And this is what is going to happen later. You're going to be able to look back on this and you'll be glad. And also, turning on the camera sometimes helps you to go into places which may be more difficult. And I did find that to be true, to make, force me to ask questions that maybe I wouldn't have asked. And now looking back on this, 5.5 years later, I was able to really connect with my dad deeper because I did things that seemed uncomfortable or were, because life is uncomfortable like that. Parkinson's, when we don't know what it is, how it affects everybody different, it's uncomfortable. And a lot of people stopped visiting my dad, not because they didn't love him, because they didn't like him, because they didn't know what to do, because it was uncomfortable and they didn't know. And so, not in like, I'm just going to stay away. I think it's just, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll figure it out. Maybe I shouldn't be there. And then all of a sudden time goes by and it's gone. And on the other side, my parents are just hoping somebody will just stop by and sit by the bed or sit with him when you can't understand a word that he's saying and it's difficult and you feel the weight of like, I hope I can understand this so he feels okay. But it's like, it's okay. It's still okay, because it's still better that you were there. Even if you have to go, oh yeah, I'm not sure. But that's hard. I have no judgment for anybody on that, but that's what that's what I felt like. If I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do it, because the other side of that was in sobriety, when I was in rooms listening to real stories, it was that real honest vulnerability that made me feel okay to bring myself forward and to feel not so other, that other people go through these things. And why are we all hiding this? Again, the point is not to trauma dump on everybody and just be an open wound at all times, but we can be more honest about these things, So, yeah.
No, it's a great way to wrap things up for us. And also, if I may be so bold, if you're listening or watching or both, we're providing an opportunity. You're more than welcome to interact with us. Definitely reach out. You can, hit us up on comments. You could share your story. We would love to do that. Certainly, if there's a lot of stuff for us that we receive, we would certainly figure out a way to talk about it and chat and all that stuff. So it's an opportunity for you to show up. No pressure. You don't have to, but it would be lovely to hear from people. And also, you can kind of share what you want. And, we would love to, for me, this experience the gratitude for me on this experience has been a few folks have reached out to me, have seen what we've been doing. And even in the past, when they knew what we were doing before we've made it public, and have showed their appreciation that we're doing it. And that for me, it was huge. And kind of like, that's money for me, that's the best. So feel free to do that. And, obviously we always ask for likes and comments and all those things that YouTubers and podcasters ask for, but please, feel free to be a part of the conversation. And, this grows with everybody. Because we want to do more. We want to talk about this story. We want to talk about Parkinson's and there's no bounds to where we can go with it. So by all means, share.
And we hope that we're a couple people who are able to bring that. There are tons of, amazing, crazy, awesome stories out there. I think the one thing is our story is meant for just connection and showing up as yourself. And I think that's important to have spaces like that where we can do that. And I hope that we provide that. And if you think that's the case too, please, share it out or comment or tell us what you think.
Thank you to everybody for listening. We appreciate you. We want to do more and hear more. As Jamen mentioned earlier, we have documentaries are up, podcasts are up, a very active social media presence. Jamen drives a lot of that, and you can kind of keep up with a lot of extra stuff. And there's a whole history of stuff that's happened even as we were making this over the time. So if you want to kind of dig in and get some context and perspective, it's there for you. So please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you all out there.